When you look at the global marketplace, it's a real battlefield, right? Some companies just skyrocket, and others, well, they just don't make it. And you might think it's all about having a better product, but that's not always the whole story. A lot of the time, the real secret is a super smart strategy happening behind the scenes, and that's what we're digging into today, something called international procurement.
So let's really get into it. How does a business actually win on the world stage? Our first thought is usually, oh, they must have the coolest product, or their marketing is just genius. But what if the real game changer, the thing that gives them that edge, is buried somewhere you'd never think to look?
And here's the twist. It's not just about what a company sells. It's about what it buys. Sounds kind of simple, right? But it's not just shopping. It's this whole strategic process called procurement. And trust me, it's a really big deal.
All right, so if we're going to win the global game, we need to understand the rules. Let's break this down.
Okay, so what is procurement? Basically, it's the whole strategic process of getting everything a company needs to operate. But, and this is the important part, it's so much more than just finding the cheapest price. Think of it like this. It's about building a strong foundation for your house, not just buying the cheapest bricks. It's all about managing risk and creating real value all along the supply chain.
So how does this actually work? What does it look like on the ground? Well, while every company's journey is a little different, there's a pretty solid playbook that most of the successful ones follow. Let's take a look at the map.
Okay, first things first. You can't just jump in. The whole thing kicks off with a ton of homework. Step 1 is looking in the mirror, really figuring out what you actually need. Then you turn your gaze outward. You start scouting the entire global market of suppliers, gathering all the intel you can. It's like a reconnaissance mission before the main event.
And this chart, wow, it lays out the whole 7-step journey perfectly. So, once you've done that initial homework we just talked about, the needs analysis and market assessment, you've got to build a strategy. You have to decide how you're going to get what you need. From there, you put that plan into action, usually sending out what they call requests for proposals. Then comes the really critical part, negotiation and picking that winning bid. But here's the thing, it doesn't just stop there. The final step is all about constantly looking for ways to make that supply chain better and better. This whole thing, this is the blueprint.
All right, so pretty early in this game, companies hit a major fork in the road, a really big decision. They have to choose between two very different paths, sourcing or outsourcing.
So what's sourcing? Think of it like this. It's all about finding the absolute best ingredients for whatever you're making. The example here is perfect. Starbucks, right? They're scouring the entire planet for the best coffee beans. They're not paying someone else to make coffee for them. They're buying the raw materials, the core components of their final product.
Outsourcing, on the other hand, is totally different. To stick with our food analogy, this is like hiring a world-class chef to handle one part of your menu. Take Powerski. They don't build their own engines for their jet boards. No way. They hand that whole complicated process over to an expert vendor. Why? So they can pour all their energy into what they do best, which is design and innovation.
And this right here shows you the huge trade-off with outsourcing. It's a classic double-edged sword. The upside? Oh, it's massive. You can slash costs, and you get to really zero in on your core business. But the downside is just as big. You could be exposing confidential info, get hit with hidden costs you never saw coming, or even worse, lose control over quality. It is always, always a calculated risk. Okay, so whether you decide to source or outsource, you run right into the next big challenge, choosing your suppliers, and you have to get this right. This is where things can get really tricky, because picking the wrong partner, well, it can be a total disaster.
And this real-world story about Dole and Chiquita is the perfect example. So a massive hurricane slams into Honduras. Dole had put a ton of its eggs in that one basket, relying heavily on the region. And bam! They lost a quarter of their entire global banana supply, just like that. But Chiquita, they had played it differently. They had suppliers all over the world. So while they still took a hit, they lost way less. It just goes to show how critical this choice is.
So this really boils down to that age-old question, right? Do you put all your eggs in one basket, or do you spread them out? If you go with just one supplier, sole sourcing, you can often get better prices and you have more leverage. But if you use multiple suppliers, multi-sourcing, you've got that flexibility, that safety net to survive a disaster. There's no single right answer. It all comes down to how much risk a company is willing to take on.
And it's not just a choice between one supplier or many. Companies have this whole toolkit of strategies for finding the right partners.
They can play suppliers against each other to drive down prices, or they can do the opposite and build these incredibly deep partnerships with just a handful. Some companies even go all out and just buy their supplier. That's called vertical integration. Then you've got these really cool, complex alliances like the Japanese keiretsu, or even using super flexible virtual companies on demand. Lots of ways to play it.
But no matter which strategy you choose, it always comes back to this simple, disciplined, three-step process. First, you find potential suppliers. Second, you vet them, checking everything from price and quality to their ability to deliver. And finally, you hammer out the details and negotiate that all-important contract.
And all of this leads us to the final and maybe the most crucial piece of the puzzle: building a real winning partnership.
Because really, when you think about it, the goal isn't just to get a good deal on one transaction. That's short-term thinking. The real value, the big prize, is created over the long haul. It comes from working together, side by side, to find ways to reduce costs, be more efficient, and even come up with new ideas. And that kind of magic only happens when you have a really strong, trusting relationship.
And when you get that partnership right, it creates this incredible ripple effect through the whole business. Yeah, it cuts costs. That's a given. But it goes so much further. The quality of your product gets better. You have better support when, inevitably, something goes wrong. And all of that flows right down to the most important person, your customer. They end up happier. It really is a win-win-win.
So this leaves us with a pretty big idea to think about. In today's global economy, where everything is connected, is it possible that the true secret to success isn't just about your product? Maybe, just maybe, it's about the strength of the partnerships you build. It makes you wonder, is who you partner with ultimately more important than what you sell?